This is the last time that Earth had a mass extinction, before the age of dinosaurs began. Let's go back in time and find out how it ended. Hey there, welcome to Paleo Logic. I am your host. The age of dinosaurs often seems like it lasted forever, but that wasn't really the case. In reality, the dinosaurs only held dominance over Earth for 180 million years before their own extinction event. And their entire era, the Mesozoic, was only 185 million years long. That means that the Mesozoic was shorter than the Jurassic Park movie franchise. But the Mesozoic was still made up of three periods: the Triassic, the Jurassic, and the Cretaceous. And each one represents a major turning point in the history of life on Earth. Today we're going to talk about the first of those periods, the Triassic. So let's dig into it. Triassic takes us back in time, all the way to 252 million years ago. Back then, the world looked vastly different than it does today. Pangaea was still intact, the supercontinent that assembled during the late Paleozoic and assembled all the land masses together. Also, most of the planet was still buried under ice. As the supercontinent drifted southwards, the climate gradually warmed, allowing life to flourish once again. That's because the Triassic was the first period of the Mesozoic Era. And if you're wondering what came before the Mesozoic, you'll have to excuse me while I take a quick detour. Okay, so before the Mesozoic, there was the Paleozoic, which was an era that spanned more than 300 million years of Earth's history, and included some of the greatest turning points in evolution, like the origin of life itself, the explosion of life during the Cambrian, the first animals to crawl up onto land during the Devonian, the first forests during the Carboniferous, and of course the first great mass extinction at the end of the Permian. This extinction wiped out 96% of all marine species and 70% of all terrestrial species, including every known giant amphibian. It was the worst mass extinction in Earth's history until that one time when something even worse happened. That's right, I'm talking about the Great Dying, as far as we can tell. The Great Dying was caused by massive volcanic eruptions in what is now Siberia. These eruptions released huge amounts of greenhouse gases and ash into the atmosphere, blocking out the sun and acidifying the oceans. All life on Earth suffered. But it turns out that large bodies of water tend to absorb a lot of that excess heat. That gave life a fighting chance. Some amphibians survived in places like the South China Sea, giving rise to a new group of early tetrapods, the ancestors of all modern amphibians and reptiles. And in the shallow seas around the world, a few small marine critters lived on, like the ancestors of modern corals and a group of shelled animals called brachiopods. The Great Dying not only kicked off the Mesozoic era, it also paved the way for the Triassic. The Triassic began with the splitting of Pangaea into two smaller landmasses, which we call Laurasia and Gondwana. With the continents drifting apart, new oceans formed, and the climate continued to warm. The Triassic lasted for about 50 million years, which was enough time for life to recover from the Great Dying, and also enough time for a bunch of weird stuff to evolve. Like you've probably heard of dinosaurs before. We usually think of them as being dominant throughout the entire Mesozoic, but they actually only started to become prominent towards the end of the Triassic. And the beginning of the period was dominated instead by a group of reptiles called Archosaurs. The name comes from the Greek words arch, meaning chief, and sauros, meaning lizard. So Archosaurs were kind of the chief lizards. And they weren't just any old lizards, mind you, but rather a diverse group of mostly medium-sized predators and scavengers. The best-known archosaurs are obviously the dinosaurs, but they were joined by other groups like crocodilians, the ancestors of crocodiles and alligators, and the relatives of kangaroos. That's right, the ancestors of proto-wombats evolved during the Triassic. See, archosaurs were a very successful group, and part of the reason for that was the development of a special kind of egg. Amniotes are a group that includes all tetrapods that lay eggs with shells like birds, turtles, and of course archosaurs. They developed this trait independently from the reptiles that gave rise to today's snakes and lizards. Amniotic eggs have several key features that allowed them to thrive on land. They have a tough outer shell made of calcium carbonate that protects the embryo inside. They also have membranes that surround and nourish the developing baby, allowing them to grow much larger than the offspring of other egg-laying vertebrates. Finally, amniotes can produce their own urea, which helps them excrete waste while retaining water. These adaptations meant that amniotic eggs could be laid far away from water, laying the foundation for animals to fully conquer dry land. But archosaurs weren't the only ones making use of this new technology. During the Triassic, mammals started to appear too. Okay, yes, technically, the first mammals actually appeared earlier in the Permian. But at the beginning of the Triassic, these early mammals were small and mostly insect eaters. Towards the end of the period, however, we see the appearance of Cynodonts. The name comes from the Greek words for dog and tooth, because Cynodonts have teeth that look kind of like dog teeth. That's why they're also sometimes called mammal-like reptiles. Even though they're actually more closely related to dinosaurs than to mammals, Cynodonts evolved many of the key traits that we associate with mammals today, including fur, larger brains, and the ability to produce milk. Mammals and Cynodonts diverged during the Triassic, but they remained roughly the same size, small. Cynodonts were small and furry, but they also had big teeth and jaws that allowed them to be efficient predators. One of the most famous Cynodonts is a critter named Morganucodon, who has the honor of being the oldest known mammal to have been both furry and warm-blooded. Modern studies of its bones suggest that it was the size of a squirrel and used to groom itself like a cat. Morganucodon is our oldest relative that we would recognize as a mammal, but unfortunately, it was also the last. See, towards the end of the Triassic, there was another mass extinction, and this one hit hard, wiping out about 75% of all species. It's called the End-Triassic Extinction Event, or the Triassic-Jurassic Extinction Event. The cause is still a mystery, although some scientists think it may have been triggered by a series of volcanic eruptions in what is now the western United States. Others, however, argue that it was caused by an asteroid impact that was only slightly smaller than the one that killed off the dinosaurs. Whatever the cause, the effects were global. Among the victims of this extinction were many of the groups that we've talked about today, including most archosaurs, many Cynodonts, and most importantly, many of the large animals that had been dominating the landscape. Suddenly, the stage was set for the rise of dinosaurs. Unfortunately, though, the Triassic ended before they took over. The Triassic drew to a close 201 million years ago when the supercontinent Pangaea rifted apart, allowing new ocean currents to circulate around the globe. This led to a dramatic increase in temperatures, leading to the formation of vast deserts and open woodlands across the planet. It was the perfect setting for the dinosaurs. So that's the Triassic in a nutshell, a period marked by the devastation of the great dying and the rise of new life, the dawn of amniotes, the radiation of archosaurs, the emergence of mammals, and the ultimate setting of the stage for the dinosaurs. Do we forget to stay tuned for the next episode where we finally dive into the world of dinosaurs? If you enjoyed today's episode, I would like to take a moment to say a special thank you to our supporters. Without your support, none of this would be possible. If you want to learn more about how you can support the channel, check out the links in the description. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time on Paleo Logic.